Hey, what's going on, everybody? On today's show, we're going to be talking about world modeling, which we've talked about on the show before with NVIDIA. But today, specifically, we're going to be talking and diving a little bit deeper into what Meta recently released. And that is something called, I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. The shorthand is V-JEPA 2, but that stands for Video Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture 2. So that's actually a model that can be downloaded and people can start playing with. It's a bit open source, which is really cool. Meta's done that before. And we're also going to be diving into another concept called MVP, not MCP, MVP, and not minimally viable product, which is the way I would know MVP, but actually minimal, see now I messed myself up. It's minimal video pairs. So we have a lot to discuss on this show, but it really all does get back to world modeling and why that's fundamentally different from something like LLMs. It's why Jan LeCun has said over and over again, probably maybe some of the reasons, I don't know, why he joined Meta is because there's this push to go beyond the limitations of what language models can do. So that's what's on the show today. Today is July 10th, 2025. This is the Daily AI Show, and I'm joined currently by Beth, Andy, Junmi, and I'm Brian. I imagine we will have Carl in here as well today. Guys, this one's like interesting. And I think for me, previous to this show, and I think Carl sharing this came out about a month ago, maybe a little less. So it's fairly recent. I was really sort of associated NVIDIA with world modeling, and that's not wrong. NVIDIA is doing a lot of work there, but it is really interesting to see what Meta is doing with this model, and more specifically about the MVP. And so I just want to give a just brief overview of what that is, and then we can dive definitely into like the specifics and get into the ideas. But this is the gist of it. In the past, there's been a bit of cheating involved that models have been able to do. Let's take robotics as an example, because this comes around in robotics quite a bit, where because of certain cues, certain language cues, a snapshot of an image, a model might be able to sort of cheat its way to predicting what the next move is. Just think of something simple like moving a block. We've seen the folding the clothes, the moving the blocks, sorting the desk, these types of videos that we've seen over and over again, where it's a single arm sort of moving around. But here's an example that I got from Perplexity. I think this pretty much explains what the difference is. If you have video one, and a video one is a person puts bread between two ingredients. Listen to that, between two ingredients, not a sandwich, right? The opposite. And video two is a person puts bread under the ingredients. Now, the model gets the same exact question, which is, what did the person do with the bread? As a human, this is very easy. We can assess this video and we can say, well, in one of them, the bread is in one location and one is the other. But it's those two videos are very similar. And that's where MVP really starts to shine, because the answers are, for one, even though it was the same exact question, puts the bread between the ingredients. And the answer to B is stacks the bread under the ingredients. And this may seem something that's sort of trivial for humans, but actually this is something that's very, very hard for robotics to learn. And this really gets into the crux of part of the way that this V-JEPA 2 is enabling to work. And we can get into how big the model is. I'll leave that to somebody else, as well as its speed over NVIDIA, or at least its predicted speed over NVIDIA, even into what I would say is its ability to be used by people who simply want to play with home robotics. I mean, this is going to be used in really big instances, but it actually doesn't preclude somebody who's just got an interest in this with building a home robotic arm, which you can buy pretty easily online, actually downloading this onto a capable computer, going and finding some simple scripts from the community that's already building with this model, and literally have a model on your desk that moves things around. All it really needs to do the task is an end image of what the ideal outcome is. So what I would do is basically say, here's the start of where we are. And without telling you anything else, you're in a new raw video, new raw data. So there's no pre-training on, let's say, my desk, my messy desk. And then what's really cool about this is that what they're saying is the arm, given that final image of the clean desk, and not knowing anything or being pre-trained before should be able to connect the dots. And it does that in a lot of really interesting ways, including MVP. So I'll stop talking there. That's a bit of an intro there, but that just kind of gives you an idea of what we're discussing today. By the way, Carl has also joined us. So we've got the whole group here for now. So who wants to kind of pick it up from there? Who feels like maybe there's something I brushed over? That's sort of where my brain was. There's a lot more to this, but it's very, very cool.
Yeah, no, I can go because this is originally the topic that I recommended. There's one thing that I wanted, there's a video that I wanted to show where I think it gives you a little bit of an idea of what like what exactly Brian just mentioned, but also I think like one of the reasons why I brought this show up was when Jan LeCun was on the Big Technology podcast, and he's been saying this for like I think a year, 2 years now, that we won't get to artificial general intelligence, super intelligence. I forgot the term that he used because he thinks AGI is a stupid term. That you can't just keep scaling up large language models to reach that. There has to be something else. And this is the research that he's going to. And I also want to point out that he made it very clear that I think it was on Threads or Blue Sky or wherever he's on now, that he's doing AI research, not AI products. So when Scale AI, I mean, Alexander Wang and the new super intelligence division, it's still separate from him because he's doing the research that may not come into fruit for even, he said 2, 10, even longer years. So he's kind of isolated in that. So what V-JEPA 2, you could kind of try it, but we don't even know when this will be deployed as a usable product. It like you can go out and download the go to GitHub, add to the research, but productizing, commoditizing it, I'm not sure when it's going to come out. So anyway, that being said, I thought it would be interesting to share just a little bit. I thought this was a pretty neat kind of simple video on what that looks like. Okay. All right.
Meta just dropped something that's going to change everything we know about AI and robotics. They call it V-JEPA 2, and it's not just another AI model. It's a world model that actually understands physics like a human does. This thing was trained on over 1 million hours of video, learning how the real world actually works without anyone having to teach it step by step. The results, robots using V-JEPA 2 are hitting 65 to 80% success rates on tasks they've never seen before. No programming, no extensive training, just pure understanding. But here's what makes this absolutely wild. It runs 30 times faster than NVIDIA's competing model. Meta is giving this away for free to researchers, which means we're about to see an explosion of robots that can actually think before they act. Your delivery robot won't just follow GPS anymore. It'll understand that puddle might be slippery, that person looks like they're about to cross the street, that package needs gentle handling. We're literally watching the birth of robots that understand.
Okay. The rest is kind of more of like hype. But I thought that gives you a little bit of idea where this is going and what it could power. And I think too, part of this is, I don't know if Brian, I came a little bit late on this. It's still kind of predicting, but it's predicting, it's not pixels. It's like a 3D canvas, and it's predicting the next motion. So if someone's like throwing glass, there's a prediction, but it's really, really good at it. Like it's trained on, I think, is it 1 million hours of video, right? So think about the training of video and having that world view, which is much different than ingesting like content, unstructured content, right? And the only model right now that I think can do this, and it's really slow, is Gemini. Can kind of look through a video if you upload a video that way. So I'm very curious where this is going, because it's a completely different model trained on video itself.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up just before we jump into other people. On the right, there's 2 videos here on the screen. On the right, you're actually seeing it's showing some where it's predicting what should happen next. So it just said predict close the fridge. Somebody's cooking, it looks like, and they pulled ingredients out of a fridge, and now it's saying you should squeeze the bottle. That was the next prediction on it. And so it's and then I think it's cycling over here where it's saying prediction is like, what does it say? Open the fridge is the next thing they should do. On the left, it says unlock world understanding, and it says V-JEPA 2 delivers exceptional motion understanding as well as leading visual reasoning capabilities when combined with language modeling. And what we have is a video of a person doing a dive into a pool, and then on what it says on the screen is forward 1.5 somersault, no twist, pike on it. Now that part, I'm not exactly sure if they're saying the combination there is that the V-JEPA 2 understood what was happening in the video, or they're saying with a combination that it could create the video. That part I wasn't as sure. So I don't know if you guys can clarify that. The right makes sense because it's showing about the predictive qualities to it, like you were just saying, Carl.
Yeah. I think too, one of the thoughts I had about this too would be, it's like, okay, how does models like Tesla's robo taxi and Waymo work, right? But it's very different because there's a whole bunch of sensors connected to detailed mapping, right? And then because I was thinking about, okay, if you have robots navigating space, any type of space, that like, okay, how do they not run into an animal that would say get in front of them? How would they avoid like, let's say, like people coming out and they're moving and it just suddenly crosses them? How do they avoid that? How do they avoid like whatever tasks they're doing? So it's very interesting, but I also think like you're gonna have a lot of sensors and so on that would be needed, plus this, to make this all comprehensive to work. And I'm thinking this research, there's probably a lot more into this that I don't know whether it's going to be Meta who's going to lead this, or I'm positive the other labs are thinking like this, because you'd have to think some people in those labs are like, well, you can only go so far with large language models. That's all you need. But I'm thinking, wouldn't you need something that does train on the world around you, including all the senses, not just, one or two?
Exactly. And I think one of the things that this does, and one of the reasons that I think Jan LeCun was so interested in it, is that it allows for a more efficient prediction, right? So you could see that you have a prediction of, one of the examples that they gave is a prediction of a ball at the top of a hill, and ball at a steep hill means the next action is going to be rolling, right? That only works for balls. If you're just looking at like the predictive pattern of that, if you start to try to understand what's happening that allows that prediction to happen, you might be able to make that judgment for a can or a stick, right? Things that are not alike enough that the pattern would work, but the world model beneath it makes it likely to be able to be predicted. And that is a much more efficient way of moving through the world, right? That's less memory intensive. That's part of why this is so exciting that it happened with relatively few training hours, if you compare it to like a pixel-based model where you cover up some part of a picture and it has to draw the pixels back. That takes a lot more. Diffusion, same thing. Diffusion is Midjourney and all of the image models, where you start with snow and then you change it enough that it starts to look like what you're asking for.
Yeah, that's the I guess that's my main takeaway, is the approach to developing the world of physics, right? In computer vision, in most use cases, it's pixel to pixel, right? They're trying to replicate on the pixel base for the entire image, but not an understanding of physics over time, such as motion, time space kind of relationships. But what JEPA does is it creates what they call a tubelet, which is essentially a 3D cube of the information, and it becomes a vector. So they save an immense amount of information, and that's why when that video was saying, oh, it's 30 times faster and those kinds of things, is because it doesn't need to be pixel perfect. What it needs to know is the differences and the relationship between the differences. And that's where that million videos come in, because it's able to predict half a second into the future, right? So and that's what that one example for the videos on the right was just showing that, oh, this person's going to open up the refrigerator, because that's the most likely thing that's going to happen as part of all the training that it's doing. So it saves on a lot of compute, because it doesn't care that it doesn't care what the refrigerator looks like. It cares that the refrigerator door is about to open, right? Those differences. So that changes in time and changes in space. What kind of use cases this really applies to is, and the main one is robotics, right? Because you want your robot to predict, oh, that thing's going to fall off the shelf. Or in your warehouse, you want to make sure that, oh, we need to make sure this package is handled and moved over here because it's the right time of day, and we've got an instruction that says, oh, it's time to move packages. I like to see it as a great leap in safety, right? Because you were giving the examples earlier about the cars and the sensors, and using all the different sensors to read, if there's an obstruction. Well, one of the examples of why, like, Tesla cars famously weren't, more safe at the time was they didn't understand what, like, a train was or a bus in front of it, right? So it didn't make sense to it. And so often you'd see those videos of, like, Teslas just, like, running into it and things like that. Whereas if you used other sensors like LiDAR and a different type of model to understand it, and that's what it really comes down, is understanding the world and the changes in it, and and it being able to identify. So in this case, JEPA can identify what that next step is. And so this use case is, like, for safety is really important, because imagine, your robot or your mechanism, your edge AI, or I should say your embodied AI, is working in tandem with a human, say first responders. Maybe Brian, you could give some experience here, is if you had that device that could help you recognize, oh, that piece of rubble's gonna fall on you, right? That's the most likely thing. It's something has shifted, right? Being able to read the world and know, oh, wait, something's moving over there that could be an injured person, just to be an extra pair of eyes and be able to move stuff away from you. Or even simple things like a desktop version where you're drinking your coffee, for example, and I just happen to put it on the edge of the table a little too far to the edge, and my desktop helper robot, which Andy talked about in the news, that they're releasing an open source one yesterday, would catch it. They'd catch that mug, because they know, oh, nope, it's most likely going to fall. Those kinds of things. And so I think that's what I got out of it. It's like, oh, this sort of gives us a half-second view into the future because of its prediction model, which will make things and interactions more fluid, safer, and allow us to build on from there.
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable accomplishment to take just review of video, which is the primary training of the V-JEPA model, and understand through pattern recognition of those images what likely outcomes are of, using statistical prediction, what likely outcomes are that match to a large degree what happens really with a full physics model of what all those objects with their various inertia, force, momentum, calculations would result in. So it's good. It's going to be applicable to generative video, and it's going to be applicable to robotic training as well. But importantly, V-JEPA 2 was trained with some robotics experience as well. Not very much, just 62 hours of robot interaction are included in that model. And you can imagine that ultimately we'll need to have many, many more hours of real humanoid robots working in the world to develop a more sophisticated model. And gathering that data and understanding that is going to assist in robotic statistical prediction of likely outcomes through pattern recognition, with the addition of not just visual field, but also contact, force feedback, etc., that they'll have sensors for. So it will expand the range of senses that embodied AI can have as training. But there's a big difference between that and truly understanding what's going on in the real world. I'll give you a simple little example. Like what a human child, fully embodied and with all the senses going about life, when the human child takes a ball and drops it, they know to look down, not to look up when they release the ball, because they have a patterned understanding that in our environment, in our world, there's gravity. Well, gravity is something that is in classical physics is something that can change. So if I end up on the space station, and I release the ball, the same thing is going to happen. But what human intuition about physics has is the understanding that these things can change. So like what happens if gravity's less, like on the moon? What would change there? And human children, probably more than 12 years old or so, can start to impute what the impact of their understanding of physics is if suddenly there are reduced constraints driven by Earth level gravity, and they understand natively through their intuition about physics, what happens when those things change. So human physics intuition is much more sophisticated, and we're talking about approximating artificial general intelligence. We need to include this world modeling and human-like intuition around what's happening in the world. And so humans include anticipating consequences before they happen, right? And that's why you see in these demonstrations that Brian just showed, that they're showing the prediction, like, oh, the refrigerator door just opened. What's going to happen next? That's a key part of it. And they're training the AIs and the robots to understand that there are these temporal consequences that have to be anticipated and acted upon. And then there's also ultimately grasping why by having some kind of representation in the AI of known physical principles and laws. And V-JEPA 2 doesn't attempt to do that. It doesn't try to create a constitutional understanding of physics, but another model might, right? And eventually will. There will be training routines that start with, okay, here's all the things you need to understand about the real world physics. And now watch the videos and apply those representations that were generated by teaching it the fundamental laws of physics. Now apply those as you watch the videos, integrate those. That's a combination of, multimodal training in effect. You've got some mathematics that are built into the model, and then you've got these multimodal inputs that are going to be training it to get a deeper and deeper understanding. And that will allow them to transfer principles across different contexts. And my last point will be, Carl mentioned, Tesla and Waymo, those companies that are doing the planning and AI development for autonomous vehicle driving. Now, that's a restricted context right? It's not a generalized context. And the main restriction is that when you're on wheeled vehicles sitting on the surface of a generally flat Earth, right, from the perspective of a single vehicle. Now, there are hills, of course, that we have to anticipate, but you eliminate gravity as a problem in the physics, right? The car is not going to suddenly fall down through the pavement, but you have to at least train the AI driver that, oh, if I drive off this cliff, that's not going to work. I have to have a flat supporting surface to drive onto in order to do that. But that does not imply an understanding in the Waymo system or the Tesla system, doesn't imply an understanding of the reason why that's a problem. It just knows that if I drive off a cliff, I know from my training that that's going to result in an accident. It doesn't say, I'm going to fall, and the farther I fall is going to increase the impact level because of physics.
But that's like the headline on this was it has a human, it is akin to a human understanding of the world, right? And a human understanding of the world, I would say that most people who are falling off a cliff or in that position would not have the thought, the physics thought of the further I fall, the faster I'm going to go, the bigger the impact. But they are going to know from that top of the cliff, like, back up, right? Like,
well,
this is bad. I could
let's
fall.
Get rid of the cliff and instead just use a shorter distance. I have a very good intuition that I can jump off of a 1 foot cliff. Okay. And if it gets any further than about 4 feet, I know that that's dangerous to my body. And why? Because I have an understanding that there's an acceleration that happens. It's not like I float down at the same speed that I experience when I jump off of 1
Yeah,
foot.
but that's through, you only know that through trial and error. I
Right.
have
Importantly,
good memories of my
right.
daughter who would have definitely walked off a cliff at 2 years old with zero understanding of physics, gravity, or that there was sure death on the other side of it, because I've caught her, and like, I think most parents will laugh about that and say, like, I think I saved my child from death daily, because they don't have that. They have to learn that through time. So I understand what you're saying, but like, to circle back to JEPA, we're talking about world models that enable if it's robotics and the other ways, to predict what is going to happen based on a set of criteria about what is built into that world model. And I don't think we're anywhere close to where we need to be, but I definitely think, let's be honest, what they're working on, Jan LeCun, but also others at Meta are working on as far as JEPA, and now this is JEPA 2, right? This is the first one. But let's not forget everything NVIDIA is doing. They have world foundation models. They have Omniverse. They have Groot N1. Then let's go on. That's just what NVIDIA is doing. They're talking about all the time. But now let's go to Dr. Fei-Fei Li and what she's studying over at Stanford, and all her education and all her research, as well as her company, centered around the human experience and how AI needs to work with humans. And I think you really start to see that there's a lot of overlap here. At least I see a lot of overlap here. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, even though I know Carl said that, Jan LeCun is just on the research side. Maybe that does or doesn't have as much to do with people coming over and this great push to go over to, we've been talking about Zuck and his ability to pull people over to Meta. But it's not beyond me to think that if you go to really intelligent people and you say, I know you've done great things on the language model side of things, we don't think that's nearly the end of the road of where this can go. We're focused, among other things, on world modeling. We're focused on heads-up displays that will eventually, as I showed in some of the demo videos, allow people with limited sight to maybe fully function in a world with just while wearing a pair of heads-up glasses, as well as other things. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is a very juicy apple to go after, because it really says we're not limited to language. We're not stopping at language. That's part of the solution. What we want to do is create in the real world, and we want to ensure that these robotics or other means have the ability to learn and predict what the next best action would be by kind of having an idea of what the start and end should look like. And I think that's just a matter of building up data over time. We've seen obviously how much smarter Waymos have gotten, and Teslas as well. And I won't take them out of it, because they have, whatever, billions or trillions of rows of data to build upon.
Yeah. And I mean, on a more personal note, another company or another group that's been researching world models is Runway. It's more of a novel approach, right? Because they want to do it so that they can generate video that adheres to what real world physics would be and things like that. So they're a proprietary model, so we don't know exactly where it stands on testing or if they've released those kinds of benchmarks or whatnot. But it'd be interesting to see if things that are coming out of open source models like V-JEPA 2 is can help them move their the needle on their development and vice versa. Because I think beyond the narrative or storytelling elements that which is their mission, I think they have an opportunity, or they're a space where you can really explore and simulate, right, the kind of effects or future prediction and those kinds of things. And I think that kind of marries well together when, either wanting to do it more in the real world applications such as autonomous vehicles or embodied AI, versus narrative storytelling and creating the worlds, because their world models kind of apply to two different things, right? On the Runway side, they want the model to be able to build the entire world, whereas V-JEPA is focused specifically on the real world physics and the spatial temporal side of things. So it might be an opportunity for Sakana to jump in, and then we'll see what, let's just mash, let's do mashups, but instead of music, let's do models and have that whole trend happen. But I think there's a lot of novel applications that understanding the physics of the real world, or understanding motion and understanding those kinds of elements for your world model, is just going to inform every other application, right? It becomes more, or at least from our perspective, more intuitive. And I think, Andy, you were talking about that a little earlier, is what we take as intuition or our learned experience, or, I don't need to, take a chainsaw to my hand to know that that's going to be a bad thing for me, and those kinds of relations to help me understand my world around me and be able to learn more of it. And by learning more of it, that speaks to more of Yen's philosophy and approach to AI in general, not just, LLMs and things like that. And I think that, so this could be a significant piece, or at least progress, a check-in, a marker, a milestone to help us build out to a more interactive, more intuitive, or natural seeming interactions. And I think that's where we will start going from what we know today to, oh, hey, that was sci-fi 10 years ago, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it goes to the bigger conversation of what got us to where we are won't get us to where we want to go, and I think that comes into this a lot, which is, what Jan LeCun, again, Dr. Feifei Li, she's doing wonderful research, but also has her own company. And so I'm really inspired by, I think now Stanford has developed robots that can do over 1,000 household tasks or something to that effect. So there's a lot of progress in this area. And yeah, it goes back to the joke of like Carl had to leave, but the robot to take out the recycling stuff. But this shows that as much as we joke about that and say like, that's the end goal for Carl, that shows the possibility with a model like V-JEPA 2, where just simply giving the model, the robot, however you want to say it, the end result can then factor in without any other training whether his driveway is slippery or snowy. He lives in Canada, right? He's in Calgary, or different things. There's a car park that's not normally there. And what's really interesting is that in a lot of ways we've said, oh, we need to do pre-training of the model. We've seen these pictures, and I'm not saying they're not helpful, where the human actually goes through and has like a exoskeleton on them to show what the movements are. And I don't necessarily, if it's on an assembly line, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do this, which is to say, well, this is a controlled environment. You're not going to find things that are like snow or weather. It's inside a controlled environment. And so if we can just show this particular robotic arm or whatever it is how to do these processes, great. But in the real world, outside of these controlled environments, that's where I think this gets really juicy. This gets really interesting, because it's not about trying to train in every potential possibility, because I think that's actually probably impossible. Just knowing that humans in general are predictable and yet unpredictable at the same time. We don't always operate, even though it would make sense to operate in a certain way. We don't. We make weird, rash decisions based on all sorts of different reasons. And so you need models that understand how to adapt to that. Like you were saying, Jimmy, like a second or two ahead of time, so that it can predict how to navigate that without actually ever seeing it before, or having any pre-trained data on it, without ever having a human walk through the steps. Because how could you scale a model under those circumstances? That's, it's really, really exciting stuff.
And if you think about it, like the very human experience of like walking towards someone, right? Walking towards someone, and then having that you both move in this direction at the same time, you both move in that direction at the same time, you're trying to do that stuff. There was a video a couple months ago of a Waymo caused like problem because they didn't do that. They all went like, yep, that it's unsafe to move, therefore I will stop. And I don't know, there were 2 or 3 of them, because there was a truck delivering stuff, and anybody who's driven on small city streets knows what that's like. Yep. you have to be able to negotiate those sort of world cues as well. The other reason I think this is very exciting is the advancements with robots are repeatedly now saying we're just 6 months away, a year away, 2 years away from having robots in our real world. And robots are like heavy, strong, like just have significant abilities to do harm to soft human bodies, right? And so the information, the ability to understand that humans are going to be unpredictable, but they, like, if I'm driving a car and I see the kid in the bicycle in my back sensor, and then it goes down, I need to stop the car, right? Because I understand that that's probably a fall or whatever. Like, I don't even need to really get exactly what has happened with that. I just know that this is like now a line that doesn't get crossed. We're just going to do that. And I think that's more of it. It's less about, for me, it's less about the robot's ability to understand itself and how to keep itself from harm in the world, but understand the soft, non-robotic world around it, and how to engage with it in a way that doesn't harm that, right? I mean, like, I would totally want a robot to be able to, like one of those robot dogs, to be able to like carry groceries from my car, but I don't want to sleep in the same room with it. Right? Like, I would like my eyeballs to be paying attention when it is moving. Now, if it's intended to harm me, that's not going to happen. But like just basic kind of stuff, those things concern me.
I want to give some kudos to Meta and their initiatives that kind of spread out from the original metaverse kind of, virtual world kind of approach that they were working on. And if you remember back to late 2023, we talked about on one of our shows a foundational data set that Meta was creating called Ego 4D and Ego Exo 4D. And what those were they created these videos, which were first person along with a camera for third person view of people performing everyday movements and tasks expressly for the purpose of training robots, okay, to provide visual grounding for robots. And then they also released earlier this year a thing called the PE video data set, or PVD, which is a collection of 1 million diverse videos, 120,000 of which are expertly annotated, further supporting machine learning for robotics and world modeling research. And then they have a third one called Hot 3D that came from Meta Reality Labs, which provides high quality egocentric 3D videos focused on hand object interactions only. So those are the kinds of approaches that Meta's research is pursuing. And now what V-JEPA 2 represents is a slightly different approach, which is not, it was curated collection of YouTube videos. It's not annotated, deliberately filmed videos of human object interactions. It was, hey, watch all these YouTube videos. And I'm sure the curation process in arriving at the 22 million videos that were included in the training that altogether were 1 million hours worth of video. I think they excluded all the fantasy genre, right? Where you would have, non-real physics worlds happening, right? So, or, magical things that happen. All of those things would have been cut out. And instead, these 22 million videos were selected because they were videos representing real world physics.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think all of what we've sort of discussed today really points to this divergence that we're going to see more and more, and probably see more and more in the news cycles and stuff like that. Yes, we hear about robotics and stuff, but I definitely think this idea of world models is going to come up more and more. I don't know if it'll become a household name, like maybe like we talk about it on this show, but I definitely think it's that next evolution where, more people realize that a large language model, more or less, is probably not the solution, as Jan LeCun has said for a while, and towards true, helpful robotics, helpful AI in our world. And so there's a lot of people, like we said, working on this. This is yet another step in the right direction. We know Meta is not nearly done. I'm sure they've already got the next things testing and they're moving on. They've got a lot of brilliant people throughout their different teams that are working on this, as they do with NVIDIA and others. So I'm really excited to see where this goes in the next, not even year, but really honestly, next 6 months. I think 2025, I'll be really interested. We're already starting to see some of the smaller robotics out and about in like Austin and things like that. And Carl shared a video not too long ago because they were pushing, and he was talking about humans or people being advocacy groups for the protected treatment of robots. I'm saying that wrong, but basically looking out for robots' best interest, even though it's an inanimate object, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot more to come for this, and it's probably going to ramp up really quickly as we start to see these humanoid robots, even the 3 and 4 foot ones that you're sort of starting to see. They're not 5'9". They're usually shorter than that. And I think just like Waymo cars, it's going to take more and more interactions with people that will really ultimately decide where this goes in the future. And importantly, not just where the tech can go, because I'm sure the tech can go super far places. It's what society will tolerate. And that probably comes down to cities and countries. And I mean, it's going to be different, right? Different countries or different people, different societies are going to be more and less okay with this. You might see greater adoption in a place like China than you would necessarily the United States, who is going to, push back against the idea of sensors or more things taking people's pictures and so on and so forth. So anyway, any last thoughts on this as we sort of wrap it up? That's sort of where my brain is. It's really interesting, but I think a lot more to come here, and a lot more times that we're going to have an opportunity to discuss, sort of world modeling and what all these companies are doing.
Yeah,
No?
I think
Okay.
it's very exciting as well. I think Andy should disclose his physics phenom history as we're talking about what regular people understand about the world. But
What I missed that. But
I'm
were you
not
sure.
not? Were you not? Did you not get a physics scholarship?
I got a citation for research on superfluid helium at Dartmouth. That's the extent of my physics contribution.
the enigma that is Andy grows as we learn year over year all the cool stuff that Andy has done, the true Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, we're going to wrap it up for today. Don't forget, you can go hang out with us after hours, if you will, after this live show by going over to the Slack community. It's free. Come join us. That's at the Daily I Show Slack. Daily I Show community.com. It's up there on the screen if you need to see it. You can also go to our website, thedailyishow.com, and you can find more information there about signing up for the newsletter. If you like to do that goes out on Sundays. We have Conundrum episodes that go out on Saturday mornings. And tomorrow we'll also have the Sci-Fi AI show, which will be coming to you live at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. That is in addition to our normal show tomorrow at this time. So tomorrow we're doing what we typically call our grab bag. It's where we go, hey, Squirrel, this is really interesting to me. And we just sort of pop back and forth and have a really good conversation. So looking forward to that. And until tomorrow, we'll see everybody.
Aloha.